Hello and welcome to my channel. So I am doing a 6-part series in which I'm going to be testing a bunch of water-based art supplies on different papers and finding out which ones work. Now this is going to include tone paper as well as different watercolor papers and mixed media. So I'm really excited to do this series. And these are just a few of the things that are going to be covered in this series. Part 6 is the Kuretake ZIG watercolors. So they are the same Gansai Tambi type of the Kuretake ZIG. I happen to have a little palette I created from the Art Snacks website when they had a sale on them, and then also this mini palette from Sketchbox. The papers I'm going to be testing are the black mixed media Strathmore paper, the tone gray mixed media paper also from Strathmore. The last Strathmore one is the toned blue mixed media paper. I have Canson mixed media paper in white. For watercolor paper, there is the Faber-Castell Studio Watercolor Hot Press paper. Then for cold press, I'm going to be using the Winsor & Newton cold press paper. So how I have this set up is I'm going to try very similar things on the 3-tone papers and see how they work. Just see what the opacity is, how bright the colors are, and then on the different white papers, I'm going to be trying the blending of 2 of them together and how they interact with each other and when the paper is wet. So I'm going to tape these down to a clipboard and let's get started on the testing. This is the only set that has metallics, so I'm very intrigued what these are going to be like. I've definitely have not used these much. They came in the November Art Snacks box. It was supposed to be a urban sketching plein air box, and I live in Michigan. November is definitely not the time of year in which I would be doing that. But it's very interesting. I technically have different colors for each one. This is the plein air set, so this is a different set of colors than what I have gotten from the Art Snack shop. Already, the gray, it doesn't show up, but the blue and the black, it does show up a very nice sparkle. Okay, now I'm going to try the other light colors. So definitely, it is showing up better on the black than I expected. And it's showing up pretty well on the gray and the blue. Definitely my favorite on all 3 of them is definitely, it's called White Gold, and it's supposed to be a metallic one. Definitely I thought those were showing up the best. And this light green showing up pretty well as well. So now going to do the dark colors. So there's a very interesting result that I was not expecting, was that some of the colors just really popped. Like this green that I have over here, it was this middle green, and on the black it just popped. And that was very interesting. I'm wondering how that's going to dry, because that's going to be a big difference in things. And I've heard the stuff get compared to gouache before, and personally I have not had a ton of experience with gouache. I have used acrylic gouache once because it came in a sketch box, and that was my entire experience with it, was that. So I haven't used more watercolor gouache yet, so I am not entirely sure. I have a couple gouaches I've been looking at purchasing soon, but yeah, with that, I don't know if that's why it was showing up more, if some of the colors are more like that. I mean, honestly, some of the darker colors, I love how they showed up on the gray and how they showed up on the blue. Not as fan of the lighter colors. Now, I used a spray and activated all the paints beforehand, and when I went to use them, I had to basically add more water. So that was very interesting how that ended up working out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a blend between two colors and see how that looks. So that turned out a lot more interesting than I thought. This is a different yellow that I used. I used the one from the sketch box. I can't remember if it's supposed to be a different yellow than I have. It might be, it looks really similar. It might be a little bit different, but it ended up just going on to the black very different. And so I wanted to try that, especially because that green showed up so brightly on the black. That's why I decided to use that one. And it wasn't as extreme of a gradation as I've done in the other test. It's just that, I don't know, I just wanted to go with the ones that I knew were showing up bright, just to see how those would work. So that's very interesting. Even as these dry on the black, they're staying almost the same brightness as they were when I laid them down. So that's very interesting to see. Moving on to the white paper, I'm going to, if you watched my other ones, you already knew this was coming, but there's a watercolor technique that I learned about when I was younger, in which you use crayon and then watercolors over top to create a really cool texture. And I'm not expecting this one to be much different, but it's probably going to be the cold press paper is going to work the best because of how the texturing is on it, because I have a very textured cold press paper that I'm using. So for this one, I ended up testing both of my yellows because I think the one from the sketch box is a little bit darker, but they worked about the same. Definitely the cold press was the best for that one. I'm not entirely surprised. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to lay down a little bit of color that I want to use for the mixing later, so that I have a dry patch and I can layer on top of a dry patch. I'm going to be doing more of a lighter red just to get just more of a different effect. That one already turned out a little darker than I meant to. Just going to darken this one up and then go over there. And definitely, like, the reason I do this is there's more than one way to do color mixing, and oddly the one I have the least experience with is putting one layer down and then another layer. I don't know why our teacher never taught it to us, but just a weird thing. Now I'm going to take a little bit of black, load it up in my brush, and see how that goes across the page. Interesting. So the one thing I've noticed with these, I did not add any water to this. Wow, it's already turning out darker on the watercolor papers. Yes, I added a little more pigment to the cold press. I was also wondering if I would do what I did on the mixed media. At least in person, it looked like it was darker here, got lighter, and then when I moved on to the watercolor paper, it seemed like the color just evened out, which I thought was really weird. Whereas it's starting darker and going lighter for both of these, even with the cold press, for the fact that I did a second layer. Okay, now I'm going to try blending two colors together. I really have no clue what to say. What in the world happens? I thought that the mixed media was going to be the worst because when I was working with it, it seemed like it was the worst. And then when I started going into the watercolor pages, it started becoming all one, like especially on the hot press. And then I'm like, okay, maybe it was a little bit the water content, even so I did less water and it's just not mixing. I added water. It didn't help. I do not know what is going on. This is where one of those, probably in a future video when I do an art piece only using these illustrations based on what comments I get, what paper I should use, I'll probably be trying to do another gradation again to figure out what in the world happened. How can I actually do it on this paper? Oof, that did not go as well as I hoped. And it didn't help that on the last one, I had so much of that yellow pigment still in my brush, which I still can't get out. That just, or not, the yellow is now stuck in the brush. It was the blue pigment that I had stuck in the brush when I tried to get more. And wow, it just is going everywhere, that pigment. Now I'm going to try doing the water drops. Okay. I do like how they spread. So I made sure to load up more pigment when I went for the hot press, and that is just immediately dispersing. And yeah, oh, I do not know if this is going to show up on camera, but what happened here with the cold press, it sort of has where I put the pigment down on the paper underneath, and then over top is the water moving. And I didn't think I put my brush that hard into it, but it definitely was spreading more. And yeah, it's very interesting, the effects, especially on this mixed media paper. It is staying in one spot more, and it's sort of interesting how it is on the hot press and the cold press. Okay, now I'm going to go on to mixing on the page itself. So definitely for mixing on the paper, I would stick to the watercolor paper, but honestly, I need to stop saying honestly in these videos. The hot press paper, it took a little bit more to mix the color. They were just sort of sitting on top of each other, and it took a little more effort to mix them than with the mixed media and the cold press. And the one thing I've been noticing about the cold press is it's not showing the texture at all, whereas with other media so far, it's been showing the texture whenever I've done anything with it. So that's a really interesting result. Now I'm going to layer another color on top of this red because it is dry now. So very interesting thing happened when I was layering it. It almost was becoming streaky, and that was not something I was expecting. Definitely something I didn't entirely want. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to dry a little different, but how it's been acting on the other papers, I think it's going to be staying very similar when it's dry to how it was wet. I mean, it did dry a little bit darker on the toned papers than when I originally laid it down, but it's not a significant difference, at least in person. So I have a feeling it's definitely going to be streaky. I think it's, at least for me, something I'm not as likely to layer. So that's just the technique I'm probably going to use. I think this one, definitely going to use more of the watercolor paper or the better quality mixed media papers. I just love how this white gold showed up on the blue tone paper and the black. During the filming, I showed my boyfriend it, and that was the first thing he commented on anything, was the blue tone paper and the black, how the white gold showed up on it. So that's a very fun thing. Definitely if you want to add some shimmer to it, the white gold is going to look really nice on those papers. As for what I think was the best paper, again, this mixed media out the door, I almost am inclined to say maybe the cold pressed paper. It didn't show a lot of the texture, so you're not going to have that coming through unless you do possibly a really watered down color. And if I was going to go with the tone papers, definitely I do like how the blue tone and the gray tone look. Anyway, in the comments, tell me which paper you think I should do an illustration on, and that will be coming out in the next few weeks. Thanks for watching this entire series, and I really hope it was beneficial for you to try to pick out what papers to use with a couple different water-soluble supplies. Okay, see you next time. Bye!